Heidi Love in the house, dropping knowledge and facts, uncovering the truth, no need for acting lax. She ain't afraid to speak her mind, breaking through the lies, rising up with love, taking us to new highs. We're living in a world full of secrets and deceit, but Heidi's here to expose, bringing truth to the beast. She's got a message, spreading it far and wide, from addiction to hope. She's on the other side. Ooh, yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Rise with me, Heidi Love. And today I have a returning guest, Miss Amy Lane. She's pretty amazing. She brings me bubbles, and I love them because they're full of information. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm doing very well. So good to see you for the third time. And
yes.
Mutual interest topic. You know this. Have family. For me, it's more kind of a regional. I grew up in the Southwest, so it's kind of a regional interest. And then I had a family member in the LDS, so that's what brought us together. Yeah.
Yes. And what our topic is today is about polygamy, everybody. So this is going to be an interesting road. And Amy's going to ask things just along the way too, with the presentation, just in case there might be things that I know that she doesn't, because it's kind of like, okay, how much can we find out on this weird topic? Because it's an odd topic, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Yes. And each one of these, how many bubbles did we get to on this? This is so many. This is all representative of tons of information. So many.
Idea.
It's a lot. Yeah, this is big. Like, you guys, this is like, each one is like a file in itself, each one.
Mm-hmm.
So she has put some work into this. So I'm going to let you take the floor to start it up and then ask me anything along the way. We can stop or however you want to. So, all right.
Okay. All right. So basically, we want to start at the beginning, which is when the government was pushing the LDS to abandon polygamy around, 1890?
Yeah.
So people went underground, just like the Freemasons went underground when they were outlawed. The polygamist groups went underground. So Rulon Jeffs, one of the prophets of the FLDS, or the work, because it wasn't really known as the FLDS until recent times they didn't really view themselves that way. But Rulon's father showed him a underground polygamist magazine and said, this is what I'm actually doing, really. This is what you need to do. You need to carry on the tradition. And I believe he had a wife named Zola who was not putting up with it, so she took the kids, left, and then he started his harem of wives, and which Warren Jeffs, the famous leader of the FLDS, was one of those children from the most favored bride. So,
and he was just the reason why I bring this up is to reiterate and let people know. My sister actually married Warren Jeff's nephew, but also it was Rulon Jeff's granddaughter's husband, because they do this. So it gets really confusing, but they weren't like together on the same line. So actually related twice. And is a steed that's going to come up. I'm sure it already has for you. So kind of gets weird, but we know some things that might not be common knowledge. I always like to kind of plug Isaac's story. He did write a book. Isaac Steed is the author, and he's a great guy. So go check him out on Amazon. So he got out.
Yes. Yeah. And so the primary basis for my research was 5 books. So I read Alyssa Wall's book. I read Rachel Jeff's book, Brent Jeff's book. I read Sam Brower's book, and then I read this other book that was kind of just an overview of kind of FLDS beliefs and kind of an overview of the general story. But reading the survivors' accounts of it is just, it's brutal. And so by the time I had recorded my FLDS podcast for DLive, I was watching the Netflix documentary right before I recorded because I really wanted to see the footage myself. And it was kind of after a really rough day, and I just started bawling for like 4 hours, and I could not stop because I had delved into this research so deeply, and You know, it was way worse than I could have ever imagined.
Right.
Because everyone talks about the child brides, which it is horrifying, and the child rape, and you know, we'll get into that with the Texas temple. But
Mm-hmm.
and you know, basically it was just rife with it.
Yeah.
In Warren's time especially.
Yes.
But it was also the banishment and creating of apostates and basically just destroying people's lives where, you know, their 40 kids and their 2 wives go to another man who's more favored to Warren, and they lose their property, their assets, their children, and they can't even speak to their families again, and then they're sent to wherever Warren deems them fit. And
Mm-hmm.
mothers separated from their children that disappeared in the night to go to Zion where no one knew where that really was. So that was
This
a
is
really
what actually
sinister
happened to
part.
that is what actually happened to Isaac is he was in Texas making the new Zion with Warren. That's his uncle. He was very close to his uncle, and he was actually projected as the next prophet. And he didn't know that, but I guess it was in Warren's journals or whatever. But he mentioned
Mm,
something to Warren one day because of the ages and different rules that had changed since Rulon had gone, which everyone was 18 then. And he said, I just don't know. I just have a question. He's very meek and mild and soft spoken. So you have to understand, like, he would not be confrontational. And he
mm-hmm,
said, you know what? You need to drive home. They'd already worked 13 hours that day. He said, you don't have your own car. You don't have your own phone. You don't have your own money. So they gave him money and a truck to drive home. But he was really tired, like clear from Texas to Utah. He got home and he thought he was going to go before the council before anything had happened. He didn't barely say anything. He got home and his house was packed. His kids were gone. His wives were gone. That was all. He never saw them
mm,
again for years and years until they raided it. And then he got
mm.
to see his kids once and then again for years and years. He finally has seen his sons again, but he has never seen his daughter anymore.
Oh,
And
it's
she's
terrible.
older now. Yeah. So they don't
Mm.
let the girls go. Yeah. So hard. Yep.
It's wow. So yeah, so that was exactly what I thought was kind of the most heinous aspect of it, and how he used the priesthood as this spiritual blackmail against people,
Mhm.
you know, because it was their salvation that was at stake, and they would have rather died than disobeyed the prophet, because if they died before disobeying the prophet, they still had a chance, but they were just totally obedient. And people are like, well, why don't they leave? Well, if you're going to lose your entire family and be called an apostate, you don't know the outside world that well. You're taught
Mm-mm.
everyone in the Gentile world is evil and about to kill
Going
you.
to hell. Yep. I mean, that was
So,
what Isaac said. Even now, I can talk to him and I'll say, I mean, they had kids together and everything. So my nieces and nephews and everything, he's so
mhm,
good with them. And I'll say, you're such a good man. And even now he'll say, thanks. But like, it doesn't matter. And this
yeah,
has been
mhm,
so many
mhm,
years ago. This has been like,
mhm,
I want to say like 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
mm,
It's probably 20 because his kids are old. And I'm
mhm,
like, he's not okay still about the whole thing. Like you said,
mm,
it's your salvation. You're not wrong. Yeah. So hard.
yeah, yeah. So, uh, you know, from the estimates, he split up to 200 to 300 families.
Wow.
And in Rachel Jeff's account, she talks about being sent to these superplexes, which were solitary confinement centers, where she couldn't even talk to her children. Um, you know, she'd be kicked out and then she'd be rebaptized like 3 times or something.
Wow.
And, you know, she was sexually abused by Warren from age 8 to age, I believe, 10, pretty seriously, and her sister as well. And so she was terrified to even talk about it because he was the prophet. And so what he would do would be like, well, touch me and I'll buy you a dog, you know.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you ever tell anyone about this, you're going to burn in hell. And so she didn't even tell anyone until her Warren arranged a husband for her, and she actually had a close relationship with him where she trusted him and she could tell him. So Warren was a total pedophile to his own kin, incestuously. He raped 4 of his own nephews when they were 5 to 6 years old, violently at Alta Academy. And 2 of those boys or men killed themselves or died of drug overdoses because they had suppressed the trauma so much. And Brent, he had suppressed it so much he didn't even remember it. And then when he went under hypnosis, that's when it all came back to him. And so his book was probably the hardest to read because his father was also excommunicated for attending the funeral of his brother's dead baby. So Warren was spying on them from above, and the next day they were excommunicated. And he excommunicated, I believe, 4 of his brothers in one day. So he was ruthless, and he had no conscience for anyone's consideration. I liken him kind of to a communist dictator in Romania called Ceausescu, and because he just, once he got so aggrandized and everyone started worshiping him like a god, then his wealth, his ego, you know, he started dabbling with the young brides. And then when Rulon died, overnight he married 7 of Rulon's wives, so his former mothers.
Yeah, that's so creepy. They do it all the time too. It's so weird. And exactly what you described happened. So Isaac was a teacher at Alta Academy, and exactly what you described as far as the dad being thrown out too. They threw his dad out, his brother out. I mean, they keep all these wives, you know. His dad had like 15 wives and who knows how many kids. I don't even know. He didn't know. He didn't know how many, because he said, I know the
Wow.
ones I grew up with, you know, which was
Mm-hmm.
3, and each
Mm-hmm.
mom had like 10 to 12. And so,
Wow.
yeah,
15.
yeah. And yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's
So,
it brings the whole edge of humanity onto it when you know
mm-hmm.
people that have kind of gone through it, and you just go, yep, she's right. So you're right on. Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, and it's not, you know, it wasn't well known until recent years. They kind of hid it very well because
Mm-hmm.
there was the 1953 raid, which was kind of bungled, and that kind of it kind of created this wall between the FLDS and the federal government, where the federal government did not interfere with them for a very long time for fear of, you know, them suing them. You know, the FLDS, they're very financially organized and powerful. The United Effort Plan or Trust was worth $110 million because of all the contracting and engineering firms, aerospace that goes along with the FLDS. So, yeah, it's I don't know. Do you want to talk about do you know anything about that, like the child labor and the
I know a
contracting part
little
of it?
bit. He did, you know, it was a well-known fact when we were living in St. George. I lived in St. George for a time, which is right by Colorado City and Hilldale, so it's like right there. And they will do work. They can outbid almost anyone because they would use
Yes.
younger boys, and they wouldn't pay them, you know, if you were just expected to work. And that was very, and actually they were almost happy about this. I know this sounds crazy, like, but as young as they could get them to, they are like, well, it's a trade. I can learn things. And I think that's an admirable thing, but like the hours they would work them are
Mhm.
obscene. And he
Mm.
owns everything. Like, but they're all fighting for that, like, oh, we want to help the church the most. No, we want to help the church the most, because you give everything to them.
Yeah.
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 So it's sad. Yeah, that's all I know. So if you have more information, that would be great, because that's all I really, know about
Yeah.
the financial end.
Yeah, I got, like I said, I've got a lot of notes. So I'll kind of just go through them. And then
Yeah,
if I want to ask
perfect.
you, and feel free to interject whenever you want to.
Awesome.
So I didn't realize how prevalent the polygamy was. There's 20 polygamous sects throughout North America. Majority are in Idaho, Montana, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, South Dakota, California, British Columbia. That's the Blackmore clan, and Mexico. And there's notoriously violent polygamous communities exist in California and Mexico under the control of the LeBaron family. So, and it said that there were tips for polygamy on crisis hotlines in 46 of the 50 states. So,
Wow.
it's a lot more common than I even realized. Because
Well,
so
and a
much is
fun
focused on Warren Jeffs and not the other sex.
other people. Yeah, the LeBaron story, which I'll let you get into, but on Sister Wives, to make this more tangible, Christine from Sister Wives, I don't know if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
watched that show. She is a LeBaron.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's widespread. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically when Warren was captured, he had between they some estimates say 78 to 90 wives, and at least 24 of them were underage. So he was just accumulating them like possessions. And once Rulon died, which Rulon was a lot more benevolent or not as crazy and like out to just outright terrorize people like Warren was.
Mm-hmm.
He liked to drink. Apparently he was a drinker, and he would let a woman decide if she wanted to be married at the appropriate age. And so it was in her power. So there wasn't all this coerced, forced underage marriage to punish the rebellious girls in Rulon's time. But when Rulon became decrepit and ill, because he had a stroke, there was a prophecy that Rulon would be restored to his youthful vigor. He would become a young man, and he would birth more children with his wives. So when Rulon was dying, they actually had cribs built for when he'd become a god. I don't even know how to describe it. It's very strange because they talk about gods and goddesses. So yeah, and so it was at this time that Warren was extremely manipulative. He was extremely cunning, and he just inserted himself into his father's power structure. And then when his father had the stroke, then he just basically said, well, I'm in control. And then when Rulon died, everyone was in shock because their whole lives revolved around this prophecy. And then Warren is taking over, and so they're people that are just under psychological shock. Kind of like Naomi Klein talks about in the shock doctrine, when you bomb a country, you destroy their infrastructure, and then you inflate the money supply, and then you drive the currency down, and people are psychologically shocked, so you can do kind of whatever you want to them. And that's exactly what he did. And he claimed there was this doomsday that was going to happen in Salt Lake City, and that everyone was going to die except for them because they were the worthy ones, but they really had to be worthy, and they had to not have any dust in their homes. Their hair stews had to be completely perfect, and they were audited by his Keystone cops. And so he, in this really incredible power stroke that he did, he said, okay, well, for the Zion in the end times, we all have to go to Hilldale Short Creek. We have to leave Salt Lake because there's going to be the end of the world there. And so by consolidating everyone in a tight space, that's how he could surveil them. That's how he could control them. He could, marry their children off to 90-year-old dudes and, separate families, kick out the lost boys. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. His crimes. It's just incredible how he was allowed to have so many crimes for such a long time, and he didn't get caught until, a very arrogant slip, a very simple slip. But
Oh yeah. And
anyway.
when he did get caught, you know that the people were so pissed because he was driving a red vehicle. I don't
red
know
was
if you know
banned.
about that. Yeah,
Yes,
red is like
yes.
not a thing, bro. Like red is a no. And
Yes.
people were like shook by I know it sounds stupid. If you're not in it, like you don't understand. This was like a massive sin. Like massive. And they were like, bro, what are you doing? And he looked like normal clothes and everything. And it did not go over. Yeah.
He had a screen printed t-shirt and shorts. He was in Gentile clothes, and then the color red he banned. Like, no one could wear the color red once he instituted his new rules, which, at one point it was men and women, or wives and husbands, could not have sex, could not even kiss, could not even hug. They could only shake hands.
Yeah.
And like, regulating people's sex lives to that point where they're willing to do it, and they're literally terrified to hug their husband, like Rachel Jeffs talks about.
So wild.
So yeah, I've kind of hopped all over the place, but I feel like I know this topic pretty well.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of
you're good
doing that. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about the quorum or the 3 wives and the celestial?
I think it would be helpful because I don't know how many people know this stuff. Like, this is true Mormon doctrine, people. Like, this is like real Mormon doctrine. And I often joke, and this is my favorite thing to say, is that polygamists or fundamentalist Mormons, whatever you want to call them, they actually live the Book of Mormon. Regular Mormons don't.
Yes.
So
yes.
When everything, this is like what Joseph Smith really wanted done. And if you don't marry 3 wives, you can't go to heaven. That's not a thing. You can't go to heaven. If you only get 2, you're not going. And they can't become gods, priests and or priestesses in the kingdom and have a planet. Like, they do all the old school stuff that the Mormons are like, we never set a planet. Yes, they did. They did. And so this is part of it. And so it was super important for them to actually get the 3 wives, and you don't get wives unless you get favor. So it puts you in a position, right? You've got to ride the line, because I've known polygamous people that I've worked with, because funny enough, nursing is like a weird sect that is okay for you to be a polygamist and be a nurse. And so they'll work with us a lot. And I remember one girl like telling me, oh yeah, we are from Short Creek, but my dad only has my mom. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great for her. Like, freaking hey, she's like, yeah, no, you don't get it. That's so bad. And I was like, what? And so even though I was Mormon, I didn't know. I guess I didn't know. Like, I was young, and she told me. I was like, what? Okay, then it's bad. I had no idea. Yeah. So you really do need it, or you won't get to the top heaven, which is the celestial kingdom. And then later you can go have spirit babies on your own planet. And yes, we know how that sounds.
It's kind of like Scientology. It's like a space cult.
Yeah. Yes, it is very much. And that's why the mainstream has gone like, we never said that. We don't have anything to do with that, because it does. It sounds crazy, and they don't want to be associated with crazy. They're very straight-laced people, and they wear ties, and they're respectable business people. They're like, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have kind of a long quote that goes along with what you just talked about from the Alta Academy tapes. And it's from Warren. So there are 3 general levels, and the highest man can go with his wives to be a god that receives everything the Father has. That man must live plural marriage in the spirit of the United Order. No man can become a god unless he has more wives than one. Having wives doesn't mean you become a god. You have to live it in the priesthood way. For a woman to become a goddess, which just does not sound Christian to me, she must be married to a man who has more than one wife. Both the man and the woman must have their marriage by revelation arranged through, and I put in parentheses, arranged through the prophet. How you enter into marriage is one of the most important things you could do. If a boy and girl agree to get married and just go do it, they can never be gods, because you must be married by revelation through the prophet. The men who become gods are perfect in obedience to everything the Lord reveals through the prophet. So setting these people up to fail before they've even begun. It's really sad. So, yeah, we talked about the priesthood. Often a girl would be woken up in the middle of the night, disoriented. She wouldn't even know, and they'd be like, well, you're marrying your first or second cousin who you don't like, you know, because you talk smack. So it's just, it's all about control of people's bodies and kind of just using them as fodder. And it's twisted. It feels like more in Warren's time than Rulon's time. Like, I kind of want to differentiate that. Because it seems like in Rulon's time, it was a lot more, people were freer to, they would wear prints, they would have shindigs, like, it looked like in the Keep Sweet, they talked about
it was more normal. Isaac said in Rulon's day, had Rulon been like another prophet like him, he would have probably never gone. Like, he would have never been shunned. He would have never been, you know, thrown out. He loved it. He said, growing up, I cannot say anything bad about my upbringing or my dad and his wives. Like, just because you don't understand doesn't mean it wasn't good, because in Rulon's time it was. He said it was good. So,
because everyone was self-sufficient, you know, everyone was very family oriented and, you know, not trusting of the government, which was really smart.
I mean, I get that one. Yeah.
Not trusting of the medicine. And yeah, so you're right. I did want to make that differentiation, because it just seems like Warren, he had a psychopathic personality, and because of that, everything kind of ruined out from that personality.
Definitely.
If that makes sense. And his voice was this kind of neuro-linguistically programming type droning Kermit the Frog weirdness. You gotta listen to it because it sucks you in. Like, I'll listen to it and I'm like sucked into it because it feels like hypnosis.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was kind of the point I made on Sean McCann, Wake the Dead, was that it is kind of this SRA type thing. And
I totally agree.
That's what happened at Alta Academy. So,
well, and the regular prophets, if you listen to conference or you listen to talks like of the higher up echelon, I swear to you, this is like a teaching, because they all do it. It's not just the polygamy branches, they all do it. And it's this weird, unassuming male, very soft voice that's very kind and sweet and very doctorly. Like, that's what I always relate it as, like caring and doctorly and like safe sounding. Like, oh, I'm not a aggressive male, I'm a nice person. Like, that's how it comes off. And I think that is one of my traumas. Like, to be honest, like, I've never been able to date anybody that didn't work in a mine or work in construction or mechanic and really gruff and like loud and like manly, like almost toxic masculinity for me, because I can't. Yeah, it's weird.
That makes sense. Oh, that's so creepy. And that makes sense because it's a maternal, more feminine energy that they're trying to suck people in with.
Oh yeah. Oh,
that's crazy, man. I learned so much from you. It's awesome. Thank you.
Remind me at the end about the maternal energy, and we'll say something, but I don't want to wreck it if you say it first. So.
Okay, let me write that down in my notes, because
you got it.
All right, and so I want to kind of continue maternal. Okay, I'm just gonna put maternal in a box.
Yeah,
that's not a bubble.
Not a bubble.
So kind of the idea of the FLDS being a criminal enterprise. Polygamy is their main crime, but they're doing all these other crimes to sustain it financially. So they're really good at hiding assets through money laundering, shell corporations to shelter property and equipment, and then they'll default on the loan and they'll keep the equipment and then resell it. Um, and they're really, like you were saying, adept at nefarious financial practices. And they do this thing called bleeding the beast, which is, basically getting as much public welfare as they possibly can to bleed the beast. So food stamps, grants and contracts for infrastructure in those areas. Like you were talking about, they'll have their wives be listed for the bidding contracts so they can get minority preference points, and they'll get these contracts with freaking the military industrial complex of the government. So
and they give no F's about it, by the way, because bleeding the beast, they want to hurt the government because they don't trust the government, because the government has placed them. Basically, I think they feel like Native Americans in a way, because they're exiled to these little tiny places that are like a reservation, and they can't live their life because they're coming down on them, and they don't care. And they are very smart. They'll send their other wives to school that are not the first wife, because that's the legal marriage. So that would be counted toward the income, but they'll send the other wives, and then one wife will stay home and take care of the kids, and the other wives will go work. And then some wives will collect welfare, the ones that are staying home with the kids or whatever, but they'll never do it for the first one, because that's the legal marriage.
Yes, exactly. And like the other wives can get food stamps because they're not technically married. And then, people that I've talked to that have gone through Colorado City area, and they're just totally creeped out because they just see all these houses that are unfinished, and that's apparently, if you don't finish the house, then you don't have to pay property tax on it.
Yep.
So
And they're very smart.
Yep. Super smart. So just like the LDS, they have a tithe, which is 10%. And if the priesthood is revoked, then they can lose all property and assets. So again, everything depends on the favor of the prophet.
Yes, because they do not own the land. They are able to build a house on a land piece that you're given or loaned. But when that happened to my brother-in-law Isaac, they just took it back. They're like, we don't care about the house you built or any of the assets there. They're ours now. So yeah, they kept it all.
And that's due to the socialistic structure of the UEP, which was established to kind of protect them from the outside world, so that if crap happened to them and they lost their job, they would be provided for. But then in the instances of people that, don't toe the line, then they lose it all. And so it's very dark how it all kind of played out. And then we were talking earlier about the color red. I was so glad you brought that up, because I thought that was one of the craziest things I'd ever read.
It's wild. Yeah.
Because he said that color was reserved for Jesus. But then he was the one, going to New Orleans, Mardi Gras, and watching porn in the hotel room with his wives, and doing all these forbidden things, because he was like a high roller getting $300,000 in cash in a soup can, from his followers. So some of the other rules, no TV, no newspapers, nothing. Music had to be composed by themselves. In certain areas like Texas, El Dorado, the Yearning for Zion Ranch, all their own clothes they had to make themselves. So just total, like, every aspect of life is tightly controlled. All children's toys were idols to be burned, all family photos and jewelry. So basically, like a communistic government saying anything you own makes you a bad person, burn it, you're bad. And that's just so dark that people were forced to do that against their will. And then controlling their diet. But at the end, when he was in prison, he forbade them a lot of foods like garlic and onion, which, you know, if you can't cook with garlic and onion, things don't taste very good. So it's just so bland. So he was just mind fucking with everyone at all times, especially when he went to prison, because then he wasn't having any fun anymore. So he kind of took it out more on his followers by creating these just absurd rules. So
Talking about diets. Okay.
okay, cool.
Fruits.
It ended there. Okay,
yes.
cool. Okay. Sorry, yeah.
That was weird. They're messing with us, bro.
I know I have my Ethernets, and I have I have good.
No, that
internet,
wasn't just
so.
you. I went too. I went too on that one. I was spinning. I was gone too, bro. Like that was weird.
Well, they didn't like that one.
Alrighty then. Yeah,
Okay.
because they never want to know the impact of the correlation that we will never find out between the government and what was really going on there. That's my opinion, but whatever.
Yeah.
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 Uh-oh. Okay. I was like, did we freeze?
No,
yeah, they
you're
couldn't
good
have
now.
meat or something, right? Wasn't that it? Or on dietary?
It was like potatoes, milk, beans, squash, and then later like a lot of vegetables and chocolate, and just it was just so brutal. Like I don't know why anyone would consent to that, but
I think it was because he did that because, and he still does it. As far as I know, this is still happening for the people that are there because he's still in prison and he's running this from prison. And he said if he can't have certain things, that they can't have them either. So
yeah,
that's what kind of human he is.
yeah. So just and then again, like they couldn't text. They weren't allowed to text. They weren't allowed to use 4-wheelers, which they all have land, and they all have to grow their own food. So it's like, you're just trying to make people's lives difficult, and they're the people
like the
sustaining
cattle.
you.
Yeah. Everybody herds their cattle now with 4-wheelers. Like, nah, I guess not them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, okay, this is a quote about the banishment. And there was an incident with the Jessup and the Barlow families where they created this historical museum to honor the 1953 raid, and they had artifacts, and they were kind of doing it as kind of a flex in a way, because they're like, hey, our family actually has more of a history of the actual FLDS than Warren Jeffs, because Rulon actually started out in the LDS. He started out in the LDS. But anyway, so Warren, the day after this opening of this museum, he expelled 21 members, including 4 of his own brothers, and he destroyed the museum, destroyed the artifacts, the monument, all of it, and then this is a quote: "Not an uncommon practice within the FLDS. When a man is thrown out of the church, the prophet automatically dissolves the transgressor's previous marriages. The freed wives and children are assigned by the prophet to someone else, so the new kids are frequently brought into established families. The prophet may later reward the new father for displaying great obedience and taking on the responsibility of someone else's family by assigning one of the stepdaughters to be another wife. The girl becomes a sister wife of her own mother and is available for sex with the man who is her new father."
Yeah.
So.
Why they're still having mom the same way. Ugh.
Yeah.
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 Creepy.
Yeah, and so do you want to talk about the apostasy? I know we've talked about it before, but do you want to talk about that for a little bit before I go into it?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So for us in the church, and whether it's mainstream or FLDS, I have to explain to people, because people always say to me, "You're smart. You seem really smart." I'm like, yeah, I know what's coming next. Like, how do you end up in this for 34 years and do all the dumb things and go through? Because like my husband, he didn't. At 16, he was like, peace out. I'm not doing that anymore. Like, no. But for people that truly put all their eggs in this basket, and this is times a trillion for the FLDS, okay? because it's so ingrained in them that
Mm-hmm.
the goyim are like horrible people out there. Like, you don't even talk. Like, if you said hi to a person in Walmart, which many times I did, because I'm just I try to be cheerful and like, hi,
Mm-hmm.
like to everyone, they just look at you like they want to kill you with their eyes. Like, it's horrible. You ought to seen the wedding, because many people came that were still in, and then there was us that were not in that, and then it was like very weird. Like, they will turn around and turn their backs to them. Like,
Mm,
they literally, he got his kids for a brief moment in time. His daughter and sons were told to cause as much chaos and trouble to my sister as possible so that they would let them go back. They were throwing away
mm-hmm.
like $600 cell phones and breaking stuff and just craziness that they would never. These are very well behaved kids, and they didn't care, because they were like, you dress like a normal person. She's not our mom. She doesn't dress right. Like none of us, like, they wear makeup. Like, me and you would be in deep trouble because of our hair. We cut our hair, because your hair is your crowning glory, and you're going to wash the feet of Jesus with it someday. So you may never cut your hair. And so,
Whoa. Oh,
yeah,
that's
that's real.
why. Oh,
Hmm.
okay. That makes so
It's
much sense now.
it's your crowning glory. Yes. And if you see a
Interesting.
polygamous person with short hair and a woman, then,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an abomination for a man to have long hair too, by the way. But it's so bad, it must have been something bad she did, and it's a show of humiliation, like that she did something so bad they held her down and cut her hair off. Like, it is a
Mm,
hysterical feeling to feel like you're going to hell. Like, I understand Isaac, and I feel so bad
mm-hmm.
when I talk to
Mm-hmm.
him sometimes, because I'm always like, you're a good person, this stuff, but it doesn't matter what I say. It's what's in there. It's already in there, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
ingrained that it's never
Mm-hmm.
gonna change. He was lucky that his parents also got chucked out, because his dad stayed with his mom, and the rest went, and they ran, and she stayed, and so he does have his parents, and that's a something that doesn't normally happen. The woman
Mm-hmm.
stays, and if an FLDS woman leaves, she doesn't get to take the kids, because they belong to the kids
Yep.
are not your right. And so this apostasy is like, it's already bad enough for someone like me that loses their family, or you get called like an apostate, or you feel like, even if they don't say anything, you're going to hell. Like, what they all think, every Easter or Christmas, what everybody's thinking about
Mm-hmm.
and it's times 1,000 for them. Like, I cannot imagine. So it's not about being smart. It's about going to heaven. And it's not, and it
Mm,
shouldn't be. It's so
mm-hmm.
ridiculous. But
Mm-hmm.
this is what happens. And so I think most people would do just about anything to save their salvation. So
Mm,
that's why there's so few
mm-hmm.
people that will speak out, especially to the level Isaac did, or I did, and
Mm-hmm.
have and continue to do, because it's considered just bad. Like, you talk about the temple or anything, even me talking about that, I don't think he'll ever do another episode with me again. Because during
Mm-hmm.
that episode, I told him, that the current prophet of the church is a Skull and Bones member. And I think he was a little bit black pilled by that. And I think he Googled it while we were on, I don't think it was good for him. Like, some people, you just can't do that. And I maybe shouldn't have at that time.
Mm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's everything. It's your everything. And living in Utah, it's times 1,000 more. Like, I mean, Colorado City isn't Utah, but it is. It's only separated by a very short distance. And they only
Yes.
did that to save their asses. So I'll let you tell that story,
Yeah.
because I'm sure you know. But yeah, that's the apostasy part.
Yeah, I live close to, I don't know if you know Monticello. There's a temple
Mm-hmm.
there,
Mm-hmm.
an LDS temple. So I kind of have grown up in this whole area, and it was just recently that I started seeing FLDS in the stores here. And that's kind of why I decided to do this, because I just thought, oh, like, that's something I don't really know that much about. I know, you know, the Dateline NBC Lost Boys
Right.
thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that came out when I was a kid, so I remember that very vividly. But other than that, I didn't know about the blood atonement. I didn't know about the tapes of the Law of Sarah, the, you know, the temple orgy in Texas. That's what got him locked away for life. The Texas indictments. So just the more sinister aspects of it that were just tightly controlled until very brave whistleblower people that were excommunicated revealed their stories.
Yes.
So I've just totally dedicated everything to them, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't know. I mean, you know, because you know.
Right.
Your
Even
brother,
I don't
but,
know everything. I mean, he won't tell me everything because to a point, that's still very sacred to him. And I know
sense,
how that sounds to people. Like, he would not be happy about me divulging the temple stuff in the mainstream because he's mainstream now. So they don't leave. They don't do that.
Yeah,
Not most of the
makes
time.
sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense, because that'd be a huge leap to just, you know, not have
Forget
that
it all.
worldview at all. Yeah. So the Book of Mormon, they can still kind of dig, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to read this quote from Brigham Young. It says, "The great challenge among this people is the apostates who are relatives. If a mother has apostate children, her emotions won't let her give them up, and she invites them into her home, thus desecrated that dedicated home." And that was from 1876. So, you know, a lot of the more darker kind of quotes come from Brigham Young and Joseph Smith from this research.
We call him Bloody Brigham because he's so bad. But Joseph was bad in his own right, but Brigham took it to a whole nother level. That's for sure.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah. So do you wanna get into blood atonement? That's kind of
yeah.
the last kind of. I want to talk a little bit about the temple in Texas at the very end. But if you want to just kind of talk about blood atonement, and then I could talk about it. Okay.
Yes, blood atonement. So there, I have a quote, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but this is the basic of it about Brigham. He said, "Love your neighbor enough to kill them. If they do a sin that has to be paid for and it is too severe and their blood has to be spilt for it, then spill it." And this is like a quote of his. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, let alone the racist stuff, which we won't even go to today because we'll be here all day. But
Right?
Brigham Young was like a total maniac with stuff like that. And there were cases, there's a case in Cedar City with the last name Anderson. That's a well-known case where he got in trouble for adultery, which I thought was funny because this is like in the time of polygamy. And I'm like, what was it? Okay. But I don't know the details. I just know he'd been in trouble for it multiple times. And his wife got his clothes ready and he got dressed and he went out. They dug his grave. He helped dig it. And then they sliced his throat. He let him do it. Like, that
nuts.
is like, what?
Yeah.
And it was considered better than living. And so these things, you know, they do not believe that Jesus's blood covers all sin, and that there are some sins that you just can't do by yourself. Yeah.
Weird. So I have a quote. I have two quotes from him, for Brigham Young. "There is not a man or woman who violates the covenants made with their God that will not be required to pay the debt. The blood of Christ will never wipe that out. Your own blood must atone for it." So exactly, like, Christ is not enough to him. And then, "There are sins that men commit for which they cannot receive forgiveness or in that which is to come. And if they had their eyes open to see their true condition, they would be perfectly willing to have blood spilt on the ground to atone for their sins."
Yep. And I am an apostate. Like, that kind of stuff that he's talking about is me. Like, and when you read that, you're just like, oh, like, and everything in you, you know the truth, you know Christ, you know all of it, but still, when you hear it, you're like, ugh. Just a little bit, because you're raised up that way.
It's instilling just a shame in people that, like you said, it's so hard to break that programming, because if you've been taught that from birth, it's just like anything else. And so, okay, so I know I've said a lot of quotes, but this is my favorite quote of all this. Not favorite, but it's the most telling quote of any of this. So this is from Warren. The sinner had to be bound to an altar of stone, preferably in a sacred place such as a temple, and that was yearning for Zion Ranch. That's why he was building the temple, for blood atonement, because he ends up wanting to build a furnace to dispose of the bodies. So I'll continue. A rope of specific size would be blessed by a ritualistic prayer and then tied to certain parts of the body in a manner with which Abraham lashed down his son Isaac when God had commanded Abraham to slay the boy as an offering. As he warned to the impromptu lecture, Warren told the women that everything was done in accordance with the holy ordinances, and each step of the process had a special meaning. For instance, special ropes and knots were required and should even be done in the basement to signify the subject rising from the terrestrial kingdom and overcoming hell. And then when the subject was secure, a mask was placed over the face of the condemned person and a special knife to cut the throat of the victim in a prescribed manner. After that, some of the blood saved to be drunk by priesthood members in attendance, to seal their oaths, to keep the sacred procedure in secret, even if it meant their own lives. The rest of the blood was to be burned so that the smoke could rise to the heavens as a burnt offering and hopefully to be accepted there by God. So that sounds pretty Cain and Phoenicia to me. I don't know about you, but
it's very, the more I have studied, and the only thing that I can tell people that this is such a weird road that led me down occult studies, which I remember the day that I got the feeling from God to like study certain things, and I went, what the hell is going on? Like, I'm not reading those books, you know? And all I can say is like, very much as above, so below. If you've ever listened to the Skull and Bones, what do? They bury them and then they take them up out of the ground to raise them up. What do they do in the OTO? They wear masks. What do they do? It's so freaking similar. So creepy similar. And I've talked to New York Patriot. He's talked to me about, you know, the robes we wear, the oaths we take. I've talked to Masons, similar things.
Yes.
Like, it is creepy when you get out and you go, what the hell was I doing? Like, that was the whole thing to me. If people want to be a devil worshiper, well, you can go do that. If you want to go be a Mason, knock your boots off. I don't care about anything that you want to do. But here's the thing. Don't hurt kids. Don't hurt animals. And tell people that what they're signing up for. That's what I'm so pissed about. Like, nobody told me this. You know, nobody told me I'm going to be doing mock weirdo stuff. It didn't get that weird. Thank heaven above. But here we are, you know? Yeah, I'd have been out.
Yeah.
I'd have been out at the blood drinking. No way.
Right? So you hit the nail on the head with, you know, your Freemason comments. So I skipped this part, but the knotted ropes and cords signify important rituals. So they're used extensively in folk magic, ceremonial magic, by Freemasons. So the slab of stone, the blood drinking, the blood burning, you know, and no wonder they didn't want this practice revealed to the outside world.
There'd be no way. Yeah, they would not accept that. And the funny thing is in Joseph Smith's things, and if you guys have seen my stuff before, you know, he had a ceremonial dagger. And I am sorry, but we go right back to the OTO with a ceremonial cup and dagger. The dagger has a prayer on it so that when it kills, hopefully an animal, this is hopefully an animal in Joseph's day, what he spoke about, but the neighbor gave this account and everybody poo-pooed it and said, oh, that's too crazy. I believe Willard Chase. I believe him because of this, because of more things. Like, there's cults inside of cults inside of cults. Like, always the top,
and like
top.
Like you were saying, the FLDS are actually the real Joseph Smith,
yes,
Neo Joseph Smith acolytes. So
yes,
if anything,
they do not change the Book of Mormon. They do not read the Book of Mormon that people can read today. They read the real Book of Mormon, unabridged, which is completely different. There's been people that have left the church because they were given, Bishop Earl is one. He was given as one of, I think he was in the Quorum of the 70. They said something about, will you do this abridgment from the original to this? And he said he read the real Book of Mormon and he's like, I got to leave the church.
Oh,
He was
wow.
like,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Weird.
It makes sense because, like you said, they just interpret things and change them based on a whim and based on whatever way the wind blows. So,
well, they want to be more politically correct because the thing about the Mormon church is they're in with the NWO now. They're in with that tight, and they want to look cultural appropriation tight. Like, you mark my words, you will see gay marriage as sanctified by the mainstream at some point. Now, do I think that's okay? Sure.
Really?
But like, that's not their teaching. You know, I bet you, just like they did with the black people back in the day, they said, oh no, they're bad, blah, 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 this horrible stuff about black people. And next thing you know, oh, he got a revelation and it just happened to be during all the civil rights uprise. Oh, now they can have it. Now they can come too. Like, what is wrong with you? You know, I mean, there's too many things to answer that, but you don't treat people like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I think they'll change it.
So this unabridged or this version, unaltered version. So when was that? When did that like start being really screwed around with?
So they have made, I think it's hundreds. Let me look, and they'll lie if you look it up and see how many times, I'm going to do it right now. Have they changed the Book of Mormon? Have they changed? And they'll say, oh, that's because we changed the these to thous and blah, blah, blah. No. They have taken full pieces of it out, like full chunks of this and that. And they'll end up in something called the Journal of Discourses. And then they'll try and fight with you about, well, he gave that as a speech, so that's not really scripture or this or that. They'll argue with people. You know, if you look at the King Follett sermon, the King Follett sermon's a big one. And they go back and forth about this and they say, well, he wasn't speaking as the prophet at the time. Like, anything they want to do like that, they just chuck it out and do that. So they say there's been 5 additional major additions, but the clarifications of the text have been 4,000 or more. Whoa. Noteworthy changes. So,
and that's not counting the Mandela effect.
Yeah, no kidding on that one. I mean, I'm sure of it. Yeah, 4,000.
That's fascinating. Wow.
And they say, oh, no, they're just small ones. You know, it's no big deal. But I'm just saying, they can say what they want. But even your own branch of the polygamy is a branch of your church. Like, you all started this together. And so when your own people are saying you changed it so much it isn't even real anymore, that's something. You know, that's like, whoa. So, and I don't know.
And can you kind of, how do mainstream LDS kind of view the FLDS? Like, do they look down on them? Yeah, like, and they just try to distance themselves from the whole polygamy aspect.
In general, LDS people, no matter how nice they are to you when they're trying to convert you, they look down upon everybody that isn't on their level. They're very, very Kardashian-y. Like, when you would go to church, it was like, what's her handbag like, or the temple bag that you carry your clothes in? They literally have designer temple bags called, you'll love this, symbols. Yeah.
What?
And they're designer handbags to carry them in. And so this gets really prissy. And so they're like that in general. But for sure, they look at them like bunch of weirdos, just like they look at us, bunch of apostates. You know, it goes both ways. So, yeah.
Do they interact in the major areas? I know like St. George is a major place, but like Salt Lake City, are they? No, they stay to themselves. Yeah.
They view us as goyim, just like the rest. They wouldn't talk to us. If you tried to talk to them, they would just turn. They don't be mean or say anything to you. They just turn around and put their back to you. That's what they do. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
they don't talk to people.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, well, wow. I
Heavy
feel
stuff.
so like my brain is expanded
It gets
just talking to
crazy.
you. Yeah. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was Texas, the Yearning for Zion Ranch. Like you're talking about the raid where your brother got some of his kids back. So that was what happened. Was Warren had already been, he was, I think, already in jail for Alyssa Wall and other indictments. Alyssa Wall was forced to marry her cousin underage, and so it was like accomplice to rape charge that he got. And there was a tip to a hotline by Sarah Jessa Barlow, saying she was an underage girl at the Yearning for Zion Ranch. She had had a baby, and she had already had a baby, and she was pregnant again, and she was there against her will. And it turns out that that was just a hoax. That person, that was a woman in Colorado. And so, but they ended up raiding the ranch anyway. And so they rolled 439 cases into one case. And because they didn't know which girls were underage, what was going on, so they kind of just wrangled everyone up and sent them to CPS. Well, we know CPS is not in the interest of the common man. They basically sex traffic and pimp the kids. We know all that. So they couldn't really... They did it in a really screwed up way because, people that weren't misbehaving, they weren't doing the underage marriage, their children were taken away from them. But then also the people that were underage, their kids were given back to them. So it was really bungled, and but it was at this time that they knew that there was a treasure trove of evidence of all of, because, he was like a communist dictator where he took meticulous records of everything and audio recordings of the rapes, kind of like Kinsey, very similar to Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute. And so they broke into this place and they found the treasure trove, and they found this ritualistic temple bed that he raped Marianne Jessup on, and she was only 12 years old, and the tape is on YouTube. I've only listened to the first 5 seconds. I can't listen to it personally, but it's him and his wives, and they're raping her, and so that's what put him away forever, because the court listened to that tape.
And there was no denying it because she had a baby. So
yes, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so there was the DNA evidence, and he got really arrogant, and the first time he was arrested, or when he got arrested, it was in, I think, 2006, and it was outside of Vegas, and he was in that red Cadillac Escalade. He was in the backseat eating a Wendy's salad, and he was pretending not to be who he was. Finally, they were like, "We know who you are." And then there's that picture of him, and I swear to God, his eyes look dead in that picture. Like they're black. Like there's some kind of demon in him. You know what I mean?
It's weird.
And so, I hate Netflix, but I believe they did a very excellent job with that documentary, Keep Sweet, because they have the tapes, they have all of the home movie footage, and it just paints a horrifying picture. And I'm just so glad that he got into prison. But like you said, he's running the cult from prison, so until he
nothing's
dies,
changed.
What's really gonna change?
It makes me wonder if he just didn't pay something he was supposed to, kind of like the mob, right? Like, I just feel like they already knew, like, oh, look, here's the tapes exactly where we knew they would be, like,
yeah,
I
I
don't
think you're
know.
right, because how could they not have known? And they say, oh, he was so elusive, but the thing is, there's CCTV footage in all the
Everywhere.
cities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was in well-known places like Vegas and New Orleans,
And
Mardi
he sticks
Gras.
out. He's like 6'5". He's like a giant. He's like humongous. And so I'm like, really, this tall string bean, you missed him when he's a foot taller than normal people everywhere. Like, I don't know. I think he might be even
Yeah.
taller than that. I can't remember, but he's super tall. But half of a Nephilim or something. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah,
Well,
so weird.
that makes a lot more sense because, you know, just like with the Process Church and all these other cults, they have government assistance. I mean,
Yeah.
you can prove government collusion through the contracting bids, and then also they showed that on, I think it was on Keep Sweet, that on Larry King, you know, they were like, "Oh, we're so persecuted, you know, feel sorry
Mm-hmm.
for us." And when it comes out that that lady that was saying that, she was one of the midwives for one of the underage marriages. So she was lying through
Oh
her
wow.
teeth. And so it was like
Well, and
even the media was covering up for them, you know, the
and
MSM.
the people that were the wives that were involved in that, you have to understand, they don't all sleep together. This is not normal polygamy. Their wives usually have separate homes or separate floors, like an apartment, like upstairs, downstairs. Like they don't go all to bed together. Like that is not a
Yeah, no, no,
thing.
no.
Yeah.
This
But in that one, yes,
was just
Warren got.
Warren's sexual psychopathy.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
That's what it was because he was saying it was the law of Sarah because of polygamy in the
Mhm.
past, but it was like it was just his ticket to get freaky. That's all it was.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so you're right, they have separate houses, and I mean they'll get jealous if the younger wife is more favored and sleeps with the husband more. They will sabotage her children and create conflicts with the children. So it's this very compartmentalized hierarchy. So
Mhm.
he was really turning things on the head by saying, "Oh, let's have all these child brides, and you know, I can be on the run and I can just disappear and reappear, and no one needs to know about it." And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
kind of
they were going against their own doctrine basically by letting him do that. And
yes.
that's why so much got out of hand because like you said, they started literally worshiping him, you know. And I wanted
Mhm.
to say on the second anointing, do you know about the second anointing
Yes, I
a
think
little
you
bit?
talked about it. So it's kind of like you if you get that, then you can sin
Yes.
as much as you want and you're free. It's like a free pass. Is that what it
Mhm.
is?
It is. It's like, so
Interesting.
basically, it's like your judgment has already happened. And I listened to this guy and he had it and he left the church and I want to get him on so bad. But he spoke out about this and he explained how it happened for him. You have to actually be recommended by one of the 12 apostles to like get this. And you have to be in a certain tithing bracket. So, like a lot of money and all this stuff. So, anyway, it was mind boggling to me because I mentioned before about my temple experience and that there was a woman in there to give me my blessing. And I thought,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
she has no right to give me anything. She, a 12-year-old boy has the priesthood. I don't have the priesthood. She doesn't have it. Well, I found something out and I was listening to this guy and he said, when you get the second anointing, it's by one of the apostles and they fly in and like they do the whole big thing and they wash your feet and like it's a whole big ceremony. But at the end, the final sealing of this blessing that basically says you have already been judged on earth and that you are found free of sin anymore and that you're good to go and you can do whatever you want, so that if they need a favor done and you need to unalive somebody, you can and have a Clinton list and they can do whatever they want. Well, I found it fascinating that the last piece of the puzzle, after the apostle does this and that to the guy and all this, it finishes not in the temple. They go home and they go in their room of their bedroom, and the
Hmm.
wife seals a blessing upon the husband. And I almost fell on the floor. I was like, what? This is supposedly the top level. This is the highest thing you can achieve, right? Like other than being the prophet, I guess. And it is sealed by feminine energy. I was like, this is goddess worship. This is goddess
The
energy.
maternal. You said
I was
bring up
shocked.
the maternal. That's crazy.
I was like, oh my, and is this why they want us to keep having more and more and more babies? Is this like some weird Ishtar stuff? Like, I'm going to figure it out because you know me.
It makes sense.
Oh my
like
gosh,
alchemy,
I was shook.
Alchemy, the first stage is the Negro or whatever, and that's the void. That's the feminine. So in alchemy, it's the first.
The Negredo.
The Negredo. Yeah, sorry. I know.
No, you're good. I know what you meant.
Because it's like a color scale. So you go through the colors, and it's kind of like David Lynch. The first stage is the black. And so that makes total sense because like you were saying, you got your blessing through a woman and you said, hey, I don't care if I'm like naked and pregnant under this poncho thing. I want a man here to give me my blessing. Yeah. That's what I've been taught my entire life.
And yet they want us to keep having babies all the time. And the energy that they harness from all of this stuff, from everything from A to Z. And then for it to be a woman at the top of the line, the top of the tippy top blessing, other than the prophet himself, was your wife. And then they teach them to be all like quiet and girly and like they're very girly. I don't care what anybody says. I know that's rude. I shouldn't say girly. They're very effeminate. Okay.
Yes, even the like I had a Mormon dentist. He had like 6 daughters, and he was a really nice guy. But so clean cut that he gives you this effeminate, like you're saying, not a welder, not an electrician, but like a
they're
soft
pointy
hands.
shoe guy. They're a pointy shoe guy. I like to say that they're a pointy shoe guy because, and nothing against people that are high. I have met doctors. I'm a nurse that are very suave and not like that at all. I'm not saying they can't be. I'm just saying they teach this somewhere or something. There's something about it where they want them to come off as unassuming. It's not because they want them to be effeminate. It's because they want them very unassuming. So you'll trust them. That's what that's about. Because who will a woman go to? What's the big joke? Like every girl has a gay best guy friend, you know, and I did. Growing up, I always did. And so, I mean, he moved away. I still love him to death. But I'm just saying, like, it's like very unassuming. You feel safe. You know, you get all of those perks of a man. Like if I needed a heavy box lifted, he would do that for me. And also he didn't scare me, you know, like fine. But it blew.
But it's kind of like that Baphomet thing where it's like kind of neutering men and making women the more powerful. Actually, even though they say women are oppressed in the LDS, like you're saying, their role as giving birth is so important to the theological belief system.
It blew my mind. And as to your point with the Baphomet, what does that lead to? The Nephilim. The Nephilim, because angels were neither male nor female. And it states that right in the Bible. Like it was fascinating to me because that's why they didn't need to procreate, because they were eternal beings. They didn't need to do that. And they could take on whatever role they wanted to be whoever they wanted to with the Nephilim. So, you know, it was weird to me to figure that all out. And I was in my car listening. I was really tired after night shift. Sometimes I think that's a good thing because it goes in your brain good or something. And I was just shocked. I was like, what? Like his wife gave it to him? And I've got to find him and see if he'll still do an interview. It was like 10 years ago. So I don't know if he still does.
I tried to find information. When you talked about the second anointing, I looked it up and I could hardly find anything on it. And I didn't understand it because it was really these LDS forums. And I was like, I can't decipher this. So
I'll send you it. I'm going to send you that podcast. It's earth-shatteringly weird.
And then I just want to bring up one more point, which is like totally ties to what you just said. So Utah just designated a second state flag, which is the beehive, 1911. So we have 9/11, And if you think about it, the beehive is a symbol for alchemy and Freemasonry, but it is also a symbol for the queen, the feminine kind of matriarchal energy. And so it's just all ties together, and I'm just so glad you brought that
and there's
up because
there's gods about the hive, and they're always feminine. Like, look at Beyonce. She's the hive. She's the queen bee. Like, this stuff goes higher than we will ever know. And look at how soft and unassuming kind of Joseph was in some ways, and how assertive Emma was for that time. Like, that is weird. Yes. I'm
she
just
wore
saying,
the pants.
Yep. And then they collect these women. Why do they need to be surrounded by women? Because they need that energy. And so that makes me even more so believe that that's about, and they keep them oppressed in a way, just like with Muslim women,
Islam.
they keep them down because they don't want them to know what they are, right? Like how much power they may have. Not that I don't believe one sex has more than the other. This is about what they believe, This is about like not secret knowledge. Yeah.
Oh, but for sure.
And Crowley talks about the sacred feminine, the yoni, all these weird things like the whore of Babylon and blah blah blah. It gets, and what did she wear? The color red, and he said red was saved for the
Scarlet.
Jesus, and I'm like, I went down a rabbit hole that day. I was like, oh my gosh, like what? It was a lot. Yeah. I just think there's a lot more up than meets the eye, because if you live by a temple, when you drive by it, like, how do you feel? Because I get the creeps hard. You know what I mean? Like, but maybe that's because my experience. I mean, could be. Definitely.
It always just seems out of place, like wherever it is, and I don't know. For me, it's not as weird as Jehovah's Witnesses because they have no windows or whatever, and they're very into that Enochian John Dee, the Watchers and stuff. But it is kind of like the whole thing about the temple is it's like you can see it for a long way, so it's kind of like, look, we're here, we're establishing ourselves. And I found out this thing about secession. I was looking up secession when we watched that stupid Civil War movie the other night. It was a terrible movie, but the Deseret was they were going to establish their own Mormon controlled territory, and it was like a huge swath of the Southwest. It went all the way down, like my area, and all the way down into Arizona and part of California, and that was going to be their polygamous paradise. So I thought that was really fascinating.
So strange. I definitely think when we get to the end of the tunnel of not every question answered, but many questions answered, there will be a harnessing of feminine energy, because the beehive state, that's what Utah's called. We are the beehive state. That is our logo. That is like our mascot. And then we've got the flag and like all of our symbols. And if you walk around Salt Lake, there are little beehives everywhere, and cubes too, Saturn cubes. And it's just creepy. And I'm like, there is something, I love to tell people, because I'll talk to Freemasons or whatever. They're like, I'm not a bad person. I don't know anything about that. I'm like, yeah, but you might just be normal. Inside of this, there's always the upper echelon of every single thing. And they just are at a whole nother level, right? Like, you're not going to know. And they're like, well, I'm this many degrees and 32nd or whatever. And that's never happened. And I'm like, well, maybe they knew you had some kind of moral compass, right? They can sniff. Weird people sniff out weird people.
You listened to my podcast, I think, with Little Red. She grew up in the Shriners, and her grandfather was in the Order of Quetzalcoatl. And so what I believe exactly what you're talking about. If you're the third degree, they're not going to let you be privy to the higher realms, like the eyes wide shut type stuff, because you're just a normal person, like in the rodeo club or the Elks, and you just it's a social thing. It's a civic thing. But then if they think, oh, well, this person's kind of like a shitbag, maybe they're into kids, maybe they would be at a higher degree. And then that's when you have the Shriners and the Loyal Order of the Moose and the Order of Q, where that's invitation only. So you have to
Yes.
prove yourself as being, you know, you can blackmail people, you can be blackmailed, you're going to go into the occult, and you're going to, you know, maybe have your family murdered, or whatever blood price, like blood atonement, that you need to pay,
Yep.
they're going to
Yep.
require of you. And so you're exactly right. Like, you can't say all the Freemasons or all the this,
No.
because
And even
it's
if
always
they're high up,
compartmentalized.
say they're a 32nd or 33rd degree, maybe it's the money, right? I believe that it's the money. Like, maybe they let some people become 32nd degrees so that they can say, nothing goes on. I am one. Nothing goes on over there. I go to that. That's fine. But maybe it's always the people with millions or billions of dollars. I'm sorry, but it is.
Yes,
It
I
is.
agree. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah,
Follow the
you're
money.
right. You're right.
Yeah.
Because
It's
it
weird.
seems like even low level, like, comedians and stuff, it like I follow a lot of comedians. It's like,
Mhm.
I think they associate with these darker, like we were talking about Rogan earlier, I think.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't think all of them are in on it, you know, by any
No.
stretch of the imagination. And so I think that just plays out in our realm in all kinds of organizations.
Absolutely.
And
Well, and some
that's
of
how they
them,
deceive people.
like, maybe he made his bargain when he was an actor doing his dumb show, Fear Factor or whatever, back in the day. And now he has to do that. Maybe he doesn't even want to do that. Like, maybe literally they will kill your family, you know? So
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
ride the damn line too. Like, you don't know when you're 20 something years old what you did. Like, you're probably thinking, like, I'm good. I made it to 30 something and they haven't required anything of me. Nope. They're coming for you. It doesn't matter how old you are. They're coming for you. And that's the thing, is what I always watch for with these celebrities or whatever is who has had children that have just died in the most fantastical weirdo ways, because this is like, what? Like, they all have kids that have either died or some hysterical bad accident of a parent, somebody they really loved. And I'm sorry, this much tragedy isn't natural. It's just not natural. You can find it, and then then you'll know which ones signed up and which ones didn't. Because I'm sorry, I 100% believe in magic with a K. I 100%
Oh, yeah.
believe in certain things. And I know that some people get used as a meat suit, dude, because some people show back up and don't look the same anymore and stuff.
That's for sure.
Nope. Yeah. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm just
No,
saying.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. I'm more like truth is stranger than fiction, and like cloning. I mean, we know cloning from the orphan trains and all that stuff, so it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Whenever you look at these really ancient things, or like India, they're not like, they're a third world country, and yet their really old hieroglyphic-y stuff shows cloning. Like Diana of Ephesus and all these babies, like with like all her boobs and everything. She has like all these boobs all over. And I talked to people about this and they're like, no, they figured it out a long time ago. And then look at their population, but yet nobody has that many kids there. Like, you've never met a family from India that lives in India that has 6 or 7 kids. It's not a thing. They don't have a lot of money. Like, it's just not a thing. So I'm like, yeah, where do all these kids come from? But that's just my mind.
Yeah, and the cabbage is kind of a symbol in the popular culture for the cloning. They put it into a lot of movies and stuff, and once you see it once, you're looking out for it, and it's always with really insidious kind of stuff. So yeah.
And then like the Kardashians, oh, we can't have any more babies because I almost died because I had a Creta or whatever. And that's what Kim Kardashian has had a surrogate the last couple times. And I'm like, sure, honey, sure. You just didn't want your belly to fold in half like Beyonce's. And this is all for entertainment purposes, and we're just talking shit. I'm just saying, don't come at me.
I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, we're good. I just like to put it out there just in case. But when you watch these things and you watch like okay, you watch the Memphis 3 guy, and he's like best friends with Johnny Depp, and he gets out of prison and he's on death row, and his name is Damien Eccles. And I'm like, and then he gets out and makes a whole channel about high magic. He has a channel.
I saw that.
Brings up Mormons. Yeah.
Oh, and
weird.
Everyone in Hollywood loves him, and they're he's innocent, and
it.
They are so guilty, and like that whole case, I agree with you 100% on that case. And yeah, it's just funny how he's kind of like a Michael Aquino type figure where he just flaunts it in the public and doesn't care.
He doesn't. He does. He cares not. And, you know, even the humiliation ritual with his woman, with Miss Turd, I'm sorry to say that was a humiliation ritual, because they showed a lot of symbology, you know, and it was just, it was like a in your face to the public. And I'm not saying it wasn't interesting or funny, bro. I thought it was super funny. The Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, hilarious.
Edward Scissorhands.
People are so funny. I'm like, I wish I was that witty, but I'm just saying, like, they put this in your guys' face, and this is where we're at. And if you don't believe in like the esoteric or the occult, like, you're going to be awful shocked when things start to unravel. You can choose not to believe. I would choose not to see it too. I guess I did back in the day, but like, once you see it, you're right. You don't unsee it. It's there. And I don't mind, because I just am trying to shed light. I'm not trying to black pill anyone, but I'm also trying to save people's asses. Like, don't go get baptized a Mormon. Don't be a Mormon. Just find God on your own. It's way better, superior. So did we miss anything, do you think, on here?
I think we covered everything and more.
Awesome.
I think this went so well.
It did. And I'll send it to you as well, just like we did last time, because I know you like him too. And then I'll send you that second anointing thing. It blew my mind.
Yes,
and
for sure.
So it was super interesting. And I'm going to try and get him on the show. Maybe I'll even link it so people can see what the hell I'm talking about. So Amy, will you let people know where to find you once again?
Yeah, so I'm primarily on DLive, which is a streaming platform. So dlive.tv/Amy_Lane. And I think this weekend I am going to have my Spotify podcast up. So it should be just Amy Lane. I'm super excited about that. And then I'm also on YouTube for Amy Lane. And you can just put it in Mudflood plus Amy Lane and I'll come right up. So
awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you coming. And this has been a great time. I love when Amy comes on. I love sharing things and having her share things. It's always a fun discussion. And so appreciate you again. Look forward to another one sometime, anytime, whenever you want. So this has been Heidi Love from the Unfiltered Rise and Amy Lane. Don't miss out on seeing her stuff. She's going to be on Spotify. Y'all hear it here first. So go get on there. Check her out. Bye.